This is the DRF Players Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the DRF Players Podcast special Best of 2017 edition. For the record, it's show 297, the December 29th edition. But really, this is our best of for the year. I'm your host, Peter Thomas Fornatel, back with you in the Brooklyn bunker. You're going to be hearing a lot of words during the show from Jonathan Kinchin, but he's not with us today. We're actually recording this on Boxing Day. He is en route to Santa Anita. So replacing him, a man who's listened to this show more than, wow, really any human being should, and that's our producer, Craig Gorbunoff. Craig, how are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm live from the DRF studios, the control room actually, as we're currently monitoring the Tuesday stream live. So multitasking at its finest, but I am proud to be the biggest listener of the DRF Players Podcast for sure.
I like it. And before we dive into the first clip, I did want to talk to you. I saw you sending some stuff out on Twitter about a nice little hit over the weekend. I know you sort of took that New Year's resolution concept we spoke about on an earlier show. Seriously, you were planning on taking your horse playing to another level in 2018. Sounds like you got an early jump in 2017. At the risk of making you red board, tell us what happened.
Yeah, I really wanted to hit a multi-race wager in 2018. I listened to you pros all day, every day. I'm a producer by trade, but I'm trying to learn this handicapping business that everyone I work with so expertly knows. And I was like, I'm going to take everything I've learned. I'm going to hit a pick 3. And my initial goal was actually to play Santa Anita opening day as kind of like my warm-up. But I was handicapping Gulfstream, and I liked some of the tickets. And what got me so hyped was in the second leg of the pick 3. I believe the horse's name was Powerline. That was really the first time I looked at PPs and found a long shot that I was like, no, this horse is definitely going to win. And I was able to figure it out with the pace numbers. And I think like he had run on turf, but like 3 starts back had run a dirt race, and this was a dirt race. And on dirt he did really well. I don't remember now. It's long past, but that's my winning story. So yeah, winning the pick 3. New Year's resolution met early.
I love it. Before the calendar even turns, and you managed to get it done despite taking advice from Jonathan Kinchin. So yeah. I'm impressed. I'm impressed with that too. Actually, in all seriousness, it sounds like he was actually helpful. He told me he helped you catch a price in the first leg and talked you out of tossing the favorite in the last leg. Yeah. No, we had some good talks, and he gave me the long shot in the first leg. And my initial thought process was XYZ hadn't run in like over a year. And I was like, who knows if this guy can run still? But, this is where talking to you guys and listening to the podcast so often is really great for people like me who are trying to get into handicapping. Is you're going to learn some strategy that, you don't always want to throw out the favorite, especially when there's kind of a bit of an unknown sense in that race where XYZ hadn't run in a while. If he was going to run, he was going to win by a lot. And my thought process was to throw him out. Jonathan talked me into, no, you're going to want to play it safe here because in these multi-race wagers, you don't want to be alive 2/3 of the way and then lose out because you wanted to be bold and go against the favorite. It worked out that time for sure. All right, here's how this is going to work. We're going to revisit various shows from the 2017 year. Here's a clip from the show where we recapped the first ever Pegasus World Cup.
It was billed as a match race, and unfortunately, only half the entrants in that match race showed up. Incredible performance by Arrogant in the Pegasus. And now, how about this? New information coming to light from Timeform US's Craig Milkowski that he believes Arrogant may have actually run a full second, potentially, faster than the published time. So take your already impressive buyer speed figure, maybe add 8 or 10 points,
right?
In theory, anyway. Just take an incredible performance and just boost it up to the stratosphere. What were your general thoughts on the Pegasus, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, Arrogant is. I don't know if you listened to any of the discussions that we had last week on the podcast when Craig was the guest for both shows. But one of the things we talked about was just this question of whether or not Chrome is a great horse and should be considered one of the all-time greats. And I can understand why some people would rank him up there. But for me, I mean, what we saw in not just the Pegasus, but also in the BC Classic and in the Travers, Arrogate is, I think, in the discussion of one of the greatest horses we've seen probably the last 20 years, if not further. I don't know what else to say. This is a horse who it looked like at no point in the race was he ever in danger of losing the race. At no point in the race did Mike Smith ever seem worried. At no point did it seem like even Chrome, sure, he had some excuses. I guess he came out with a little bit of fluid on his knee. He certainly got caught wide in the first turn. But at no point did I ever think when I was watching the race that Arrogate was going to lose to Chrome or anyone else.
No, I mean, a brilliant ride by Mike Smith, hustling him away from there, getting that great position. Once the difference, I mean, you kind of knew what was happening in that race 50 yards in. Chrome was already struggling.
Sure.
And Arrogate was already in a great position. I mean, it was over. Yeah. And, Chrome, to me, I don't think you can, the post wasn't good, but, I mean, it was such a complete no-show performance that I don't think you can just blame that. My own pet theory is there was the story about him schooling a couple of days before the race and getting really hot and acting really bothered in a way that he never had before. I mean, to me, a smart horse like that was him anti-touting himself. Mm-hmm. I think whatever was bothering him, I know there's stories that something happened during the race. I think there was something bothering him before the race, and you cannot base any evaluation of California Chrome on that race. I think it's a total toss out. I think
Absolutely.
Chrome he's been one of the coolest horses of the last several years, no doubt about it. He's accomplished so much. I don't want to take anything away from that. Usually people who say statements about, like, similar to what I'm about to say, I usually don't like those people, but I just got to be honest. It's kind of crazy because I almost feel like he's a Hall of Fame light horse, right? Like, here he is, all-time money winner, accomplished so many amazing things, such a great season. I regret not for 1 second voting for him for Horse of the Year last year. I think he absolutely deserved it. But during his time, we saw him come up against two brilliant horses. I'm going to include Shared Belief for that brief moment of time when Shared Belief went by California Chrome like he was glued to the eighth pole. And then, of course, Arrogate. And I'm not even talking about the Pegasus. I'm not even counting the Pegasus in this. I'm thinking more about the Breeders' Cup Classic, where Chrome had the better trip, the better setup, and Arrogate still, defeated him rather easily. And I'm going to say it's hard for me to call a horse. It's hard for me to say California Chrome's one of the handful of best horses ever when I can name the two brilliant horses that he faced, beat him pretty soundly. But I don't mean that to take away from the legacy of what a cool horse he is. And like I said, I still think he's like sort of borderline great, but I can't push him up in that upper echelon. And Chromies, if you need to send me the hate mail, go ahead. I'll take my licking, but this is just how I feel. And this is a horse I questioned throughout the 3-year-old year and really has won my respect. And there's not a nya in my body as I say this. It's just my honest opinion. I love the horse. And I don't think the Pegasus, don't take anything away from that, but I still think looking at the overall body of work, it's hard to be as impressed as I am when I look at what someone like Arrogate has accomplished, both on the track and in terms of speed. I'm impressed by the training job of Arrogate from Bob Baffert than I am with American Pharaoh. And I say that obviously not to take anything away from the training job of American Pharaoh. It's incredible, but I just feel like Baffert, for a number of years, was in a position where he would sort of aggressively put horses through a program with seemingly the only goals being the Triple Crown races. And it seems like for the various qualities they recognized in Arrogate, that he was pointed to this late bloomer campaign. And, there are, maybe I'm wrong, but I almost feel like the old Baffert might have put the screws to this horse to try to push things a little bit earlier. and by not doing that has unleashed this beast on the racing world. And it just makes me very happy to see a horse handled like this. You know, I'm one of the people who has argued at times that the Triple Crown is as great as it is in so many ways, and how it's one of the things in racing that really works. I get all that, but there have been times in my life where I felt like it was this glass ceiling in a way for the sport because of how everything being focused on that didn't allow for horses like Arrogant at points. And to see a horse be able to achieve these heights with the signature win and the Travers being the arrival on the scene, there's something super cool about that.
That other voice you heard in that clip, of course, Mike Hogan, who used to be one of the co-hosts of this show at some point fairly early on, I believe it was in 2017. Mike went on to greener professional pastures, but he's still out there in the podcast world with a music podcast of his own called 3 Songs. And you can still follow Mike on Twitter if you're interested at mhogansays. And Mike features in this next clip as well. This was a little cheeky of me to put this one in here, Craig, but I don't know if you remember the first time on the show when we talked about a horse named Cloud Computing.
You sent me something very smug, Mike. What was it? What did you text?
Well, prior to the pod, I asked who we were going to be talking about, thinking that we're going to be talking about all the big stakes races. And you mentioned some allowance and maiden winners that I hadn't even gone back and watched. I'd heard about the races, but I hadn't had a chance to watch every one of the replays. And so my comment was, I don't think the Derby winner is going to be debuting at Aqueduct in February.
And to me, it's a snobby thing to say because it also just ties into like what I'm trying to do here with horses I talk about. I'm not necessarily trying to give you the Derby winner with every 3-year-old race I want to talk about. I want to talk about horses who I see who have potential to win graded stakes. And that's what I saw, Derby or no, that's what I saw on a February Saturday at Aqueduct when I saw Cloud Computing run. I mean, this was a horse who the word was obviously out. The horse was absolutely hammered. And I would think that even people who liked the horse and had heard all the hype, when the gates opened and the horse broke, the ground broke from under the horse, would have been ready to trade their tickets for pennies on the dollar. The horse ends up making multiple moves in the race, running greenly pretty much throughout and still getting the job done against what was a very strong field, I thought, for this time of year in New York in a maiden race. I was super impressed. So Cloud Computing ends up getting, I think it was an 84 buyer in the end. It was originally reported as 83, but when I just went and checked in the system, it was listed as an 84. Very solid debut for Claremont and Chad Brown. Mike, when you watched the tape, what did you think?
I thought it was good, but I'm not sure I'm willing to anoint him as a future stakes winner off of that effort. He beat 4 horses. I'm not sure any one of them are.
Mineralogy's a good-looking horse.
Maybe. But he. Granted, I haven't
Jonathan,
watched all.
Settle an argument here. What did you think of Cloud Computing?
Oh, I think he'll definitely win a stakes race. And the reason I knew he ran well was when I watched. Okay, so I had a friend call me who knows someone in the Chad situation and said they like this horse a lot and they think that he'll win if he breaks. Well, he didn't break. So I was like, oh, now he's not going to win. I laughed a little bit. Then they go to turn for home. And as they turn for home, I say to myself, oh, he's just not going to get there. And then someone FaceTime calls me on my computer. So my video goes away. I answer the FaceTime call. I talk to the person for a second. They were out of the country. It was my friend Robert, who's out of the country. And so I talked to him for a second. And then my phone rings and goes, wow, that was impressive. And I'm like, what? So I watched the replay and I found out that he won when I thought there was no way he was winning when they turned for home after what he overcame. And so that's when I know they were good. The narrative of my life kind of confirmed to me that the horse is really good, and I think he will win a stakes race.
The best thing about doing this podcast is the listeners and the interaction we have with them. Craig, do you remember walking around out at Del Mar for the Breeders' Cup? You were you were part of the first time I think I was ever asked to take a picture with a podcast listener.
Oh wow, really? That was the first time. Yeah, it's always fun bumping into listeners because so many people really. Well, I think, part of it is you're betting money, right? And when your money's on the line, having guys like you and guys like JK helping them out every single week. It's like they're your best friends. So it was a lot of fun bumping into the listeners in Del Mar.
Best friend or worst enemy, but we seem to stay on the right side of the line more often than not. And one of the things we wanted to do with this best of show was get some comments from listeners about their favorite moments. And this show we're about to play a couple of clips from came up from a couple of different listeners. It originally aired February 28th, and we had visits from Craig Milkowski of Timeform US, and then later from the great pro horse player Paul Matisse. Let's cue those up now on the best of 2017.
And the question was how you can make educated guesses as a horse player about when horses are likely to stretch out. And one thought that occurred to me was I was wondering if there was a way to do that with pace figures. Is this a concept that you have tackled at all in your figure making, and what are your thoughts on it?
You know, it is something I've explored many times over the years, but, numerically, visually. And the thing I find is it's a lot easier to identify the horses that aren't going to stretch out very well than it is to figure out the ones that will. You can look at the figures. If you see a horse running pace figures of 120 and a speed figure of 80, you can be pretty sure that kind of horse isn't going to stretch out very well. But a lot of times you have to watch the race as well, because sometimes it's just pace dynamics, and maybe the horse is in a speed duel and they're going to naturally go faster, trying to challenge for the lead. And sometimes if they relax routing, you can see that maybe this horse isn't a speed ball that we thought he was from his figures. So it's a tricky thing. I did hear that podcast you guys were talking about, but I think figures can help a little bit, but I think you also have to watch the races and judge it visually for yourself.
I think that I think one of the questions that we asked Craig is always one that I always want to hear. I like to hear about the not so glamorous part of figure making, and one of the questions we asked him is what's the thing in figure making that kind of keeps him up at night? What's the thing that really is it weather? Is it wind? Is it a track changing in the middle of the day? What's the thing that's the biggest nightmare for you when you're trying to get your work done?
The biggest nightmare is wrong times, and when you find a time that's wrong. Because I spend, like say you have a time that's maybe an aberration or something that's like out of the ordinary for the rest of the variant of the day. If you don't have something like that, it's pretty seamless. You just go right through and you don't have any distractions. But when those races come up, I'm under the assumption that I want to know the fast races. So when a fast race comes up, I analyze it to death. Can it be fast? Because I know I'm going to be betting those horses out of that race probably.
Yeah.
So I don't want to make a mistake in those races. And then when it turns out that the time is wrong, that really frustrates me because, I probably spent a lot of time on it, and the fact that it shouldn't have been an issue. Now I'm thinking about playing these long shot horses that, or maybe not even long shots, just something that's a little out of the ordinary, which you guys both know. That's what you want. You want something that comes out that sticks out. That's not if it's the same. If it's an easy variant to do, it's easy on your mentally for that day. But it's not going to lead to any big prices that you want to bet down the road. So I guess that would be the biggest thing that upsets me. Biggest pet peeve probably is when the time is wrong.
How do you typically evaluate if it is wrong? I know Craig had mentioned, and I'm sure you read the articles that he had done with Arrogate, and I wanted to know how you kind of handled that situation with there obviously being an issue with the timing. Do you pull out the tape and watch it again with a stopwatch, or do you have a video editing software that you use as well when that stuff happens, or how do you evaluate it?
Well, now it's a little bit easier because you do have some of those things. Like in the old days, we didn't have those things. And, I'm not one to jump to that because I found that, I don't want to, I guess I can call him out. Andy Beyer's somebody that likes to not go with the fastest figure. Like if it sticks out, he's more embarrassed about giving a figure that's too fast. So he will just automatically just say, this can't be right. That was a bad Andy impersonation. He will just project it down, and I think that's not my strategy. I can see where he's coming from, and I understand the argument, but that's not the way I go about it, because I want to bet the horses out of the fast races. You know, I have found over time that's that's your biggest advantage.
Another one of the biggest events in the early part of 2017, a horse that we used to call on the show Arrogate, Arrogant, his big run in the Dubai World Cup, and then a special guest. This was another thing that harkens back to the Mike Hogan era, where we used to have a certain old school tout visit us once in a while, Confidential Charlie. This is a little bit different. You're going to get to hear a little bit of Confidential Kinchin in this clip.
From the Tito's bar in the Hawthorne, downstairs at Hawthorne racetrack. We got there early and had some mimosas for the tournament that they were having at Hawthorne, and we watched it in their Tito's bar, which has 88 TV screens, by the way. It's the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like the back, the front, the back, the whole thing. It's great. So we watched it there, and I watched the break as I was running around the corner because I found out you could bet the race and the tournament. And I ran over there and bet some exactas. So I missed the very, very first jump. But then once I got there, I looked up and I saw a track that was lit by artificial lights. It was dark. A horse that I loved, that I was really excited about winning, with pink and bluish greenish silks, was falling back to the back. And it felt like, oh no, they're going to get pulled up. Oh no, they might win. Oh no, they're going to win. And the only difference was Zenyatta didn't get up and this horse did. And it was one of the most remarkable things I feel like I've seen in racing, where I just felt like everything was stacked against the horse, and he kept coming. My favorite part was the really annoying, super negative, at the track, no way he wins money guy standing behind me like the entire time saying, oh, nope, not going to win. 1-9, not going to win. Not. And the whole time, as soon as I recognized, like on the back stretch, that he was traveling well, I started trolling that guy with my backwards hand slap and saying, he's going to get up. He's going to get up. And then I called him a winner at the top of the stretch just to piss the guy off even more. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. Really cool.
So, a lot of people listen to this show for different reasons. Some people like to hear us argue. Some people like to hear our take on the state of affairs in racing. Others listen for the tips. And occasionally we get something right. We like to say you can't get analysis like this just anywhere. We did have an example of that from Friday's show. Why don't you replay that for us? This is from Jonathan's alter ego, Confidential Kinchin.
Dubai World Cup. Confidential Kinchin selects the fastest horse in the race, Arrogate.
There you have it from Confidential Kinchin. He tabbed that 1-9 shot right on top. JK, did you hear Confidential Kinchin appeared to have been a huge hit? Some people say they liked him more than regular Kinchin. I didn't agree with that, but I was curious if you got much feedback on your performance.
Yeah, I did. I got a couple messages, so that was fun. I'm glad it worked out. It was I had the idea of just throwing something together since I wasn't going to be here, and then I thought I would at least try to make it entertaining, so it worked out.
The joke I made on Friday, I don't know if you got a chance to listen to the show, but I said it's not like he hasn't phoned it in before on this show, but today Jonathan literally phoned it in. Normally I do the show from the Brooklyn bunker, of course, but once in a while I get to do the show from somewhere remote. Occasionally it's not very fancy, sitting in a car in the Key Food parking lot because it's alternate side of the street parking. But in April, we did get to do the show from Coolmore America's Ashford Stud, and we were joined by one of their marketing muckety-mucks, Scott Calder. I know a lot of successful people in the industry have gotten their start through that program. It's sort of like the high-class version of the Saratoga Special, the newspaper in Saratoga that produced me and so many others. I'm tongue firmly in cheek, of course. Your training, nothing against the Saratoga Special, but your training must have been a little more intense, traveling around the world. Which aspect of the business do you learn about in that program, or is it everything?
It's actually going back a step. Funny enough, my fiance was in the same Saratoga Special program as you, so I can't obviously badmouth that experience. But yeah, it's an amazing opportunity. You start off in Ireland and you spend time in America, here in Kentucky, Australia, Dubai, and England, and it's a very comprehensive thing. You do time, on the farm, and also you get a chance to do some placements with different people. So I was lucky enough, as part of that, to spend some time with Peter Snowden down in Australia, who's an amazing person and a great trainer. And I've always been more of a focused on the breeding side, but that was a great insight into the racing stable. And I think regardless of whatever you do in the business, at the end of the day, it all comes down to what happens on the track. So I think whether you do that day in or day out, you need to have an appreciation for what makes a good racehorse and how they succeed on the track.
That appearance on the podcast led to one of my absolutely favorite moments of 2017. Scott Calder, who you just heard there, was all over the official network broadcast of the Kentucky Derby, sort of in his role as the human voice of American Pharaoh. And I remember congratulating him on that appearance and him texting me back. He says not tongue-in-cheek, but I don't really believe him. Something to the effect of, NBC, Schmenbc, the highlight of my year was still appearing on the podcast. I love that. And I thank Scott for the kind words. A little bit later in that same hour on the podcast back in April, we were crashed once again by our good friend Paul Matisse.
Very specific. As a handicapper, when you're going through and looking at a maiden race, do you have any prejudices when it comes to homebreds versus horses who went through the sales ring? Do you prefer homebreds to horses that went through the ring, or does it just totally depend?
Well, anybody who's listening to this podcast, you probably can't see it, right? There's no. This is the greatest setup ever. You should see this table. It's like Pete is a mile away from Jonathan and myself, so it's great. Well, handicapping. I think the one thing about the homebreds, they seem to be. It takes more time in general terms. More time. People will take more time with them, as they develop. So they're not so hell-bent to get their money back or to win right off the bat. So probably if you're just looking at it as a straight statistic thing, the horses in the sales probably win at a higher rate, But I think it's probably just the nature of it that they just have to. And that's why those, the horses that are in the sales get those type of trainers, so it's kind of just the whole chart just flows, But I'm more probably into the homebred and watching them develop, and because that's where you can get more prices and more different things of form and the things that I prefer to do with come about. Some of the greatest bets you can make is when a hidden improvement in I don't have to tell you two guys, but a hidden improvement of a young horse, and when it's a homebred, it seems to be more apparent that will happen. And you can see it coming easier.
Of course, one of the highlights of any year of a racing podcast is going to be the Kentucky Derby. Craig, I want to ask you, as someone who wasn't necessarily that into racing before you started working at DRF, and then presumably have at least watched it out somewhere, what was the Derby's role in your life pre-DRF, and where did you watch it this year?
Well, pre-DRF, the Derby, my parents were always a fan of racing, so it would be on the TV, and I remember watching on vacation when American Pharaoh won the Derby, and then later the Preakness and Belmont winning the Triple Crown. But this year's Derby was actually pretty fun for me because I was at a bachelor party in Baltimore with a group of guys whose fantasy football league's draft order was decided by the Kentucky Derby. So,
I love that. How did that work?
The kind of like middle six, like the teams that made the playoffs, the draft order was decided by if you came in sixth place, you got the first pick of Derby horses, fifth place, the second pick of Derby horses, and so on and so forth. So it was really interesting because there was this whole group of guys who were very, had a lot of stake here in getting the winner right. And I, at the time, I wasn't new here still, but I wasn't a race expert by any means. But I thought, I had watched enough prep races, and I had a pretty good opinion. And I ended up being wrong. I was a classic Empire fan, but he got bounced around in there. It was a really fun Derby.
That's great. All right, well, let's listen to our little recap from this year of Always Dreaming's victory in the Kentucky Derby.
Man, I'm telling you, it's a real thing, Derby hangover. And it's not just like physically, like because you had too many mint juleps, but like it's kind of a sad day the day after because like you've had this buildup all year long for like 364 days, 363, I guess, if you count Oaks, like waiting for this race. And then when it's over, it's like, oh, what am I going to do next weekend? Bet the Bogey? I mean, like what? I mean, which is fine, right? I mean,
don't be knocking the Bogey, man. That's a historic race.
It seems to be coming like it's going to turn out to be a good race, but I'm always the flight home. I'm always a little bit depressed after Derby, but
it's tough.
Nonetheless, 2 weeks we'll be ready for the Preakness.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I get it, believe me, but we've got the Preakness. We got the whole Triple Crown Trail to look forward to here. The summer meets, Saratoga and Del Mar, and then the run up to the Breeders' Cup. I feel like the day after the Breeders' Cup is the one where I get a little weepy personally, but I get it. It's one of the reasons Susan and I went every year from 98 to 2003. That's right, and the reason we stopped doing it as the annual thing on our calendar was we decided it was the kind of vacation after which you needed a vacation. And we loved it, don't get me wrong, but it just became like a little too tough to sort of be like deadheaded for the entire following week. And you're right, it's not just the booze, it's the excitement, it's the anticipation, it's all that stuff tangled together. Let me ask, how did your experience at this year's Derby sort of rank with all the various years? What is it now, 9 in a row you've gone to or something crazy?
Yeah, it's 9. I only missed one Kentucky Oaks, and that was in the middle of my high school football coaching career. We had a spring game the night that Blind Luck won the Kentucky Oaks. So that's the only Oaks I've missed in that 9-year span. But look, it was fun. It's always a little bit better when it doesn't rain. But once you get there and you start actually participating, the rain doesn't really get to you much. It's just, I guess you sometimes wish that you didn't have to answer the questions about soft ground or answer the questions about will they or will they not like the surface and so on and so forth. But it's part of the handicapping puzzle we've all fallen in love with. So it was good. It ranks up there. I had a good time, a good group of people that I hung out with. So that made it a lot of fun. We took this is the first time we actually stayed in Lexington and took a van over. A friend of mine, Jake Ballas, was running a horse Burn a Diva on Friday. And so Jake has been living in Lexington for a while, knows some of the college kids from his brother going to school at UK. And so he paid a college kid $600. We rented a van for $300, and he was our driver for 2 days and drove us back and forth for a total of $1,000 between 10 people. It worked out pretty good.
Wow, that is a steal at twice the price. Another good wise guy tip amongst your many. You made me look pretty smart at a Derby party on Saturday. I was sitting there, and this doesn't even have anything to do with Divisadero or Limousine Liberal. We were sitting there on the roof at my friend's place in the South Slope between, the 90 minutes between races on the undercard, and somebody was talking about cocktails at the Kentucky Derby and mentioned the Lily. And my friends who were hosting the party, both native Louisvillians, but who've lived in New York for at least a decade, were like, there's no Lily. There's no Lily. It's the mint julep is the drink. And I was able to say, actually, my friend Jonathan is a big fan of the pink lilies that they drink on Oaks Day. And I Googled it and gave them the recipe and everything. And I was able to feel, like Mr. Kentucky Derby expert there, thanks to you. How many lilies did you consume?
Wow. In 2 days?
Yeah.
I probably shouldn't say. It was look, when they start coming by and you kind of find a spot to watch the big races and you got the big lead up going into the race, you can't really leave to go to the line to get the drink you really want. They walk by with juleps and lilies, and if they're out of juleps, you got to grab a lily. If they're out of juleps, or lilies, you got to grab a julep. So you just take what you can get. So I'll plead the fifth on how many I have.
I like it. My same friends also confirmed how big of a thing Thurby is. Their friends who still live in Louisville neglected to go to the Oaks or Derby, but did get there for Thurby. It's definitely like it's the new local day. The marketing is true. So I thought that was an interesting aspect as well. All right, enough of our yakking. Let's get down to business here and talk about this Kentucky Derby. Always Dreaming confirmed the promise he showed, confounded
some of the experts who questioned him based on the previous speed figures, etc., the Pletcher stat, etc. What did you think of Always Dreaming's performance, and what did it mean for you personally?
You mean my first pick in the Derby draft?
I left that softball right up there for you to spike in my face. I was torn between Irish War Cry. I think I went first and I went ahead, took War Cry. You got Always Dreaming, and you have a commanding lead in our little Derby draft.
No, I think he ran really well. It was good for Todd, and I tell you, one of my favorite videos I've seen the entire weekend on Twitter is the video of Angel Cordero and Todd hugging in the path, walking back to the paddock, and Angel being in tears, and how much that relationship has meant to all three of those guys, Johnny, Angel, and Todd. And I've been able. Jake Ballas has a good relationship with Cordero, and so Friday night we were actually at the same place for dinner where he was, and I looked across the table and I said, "Are you excited for tomorrow? Do you think Always Dreaming is going to relax?" And he got I've seen him a bunch of times. He got really nervous and didn't want to talk about it. He's like, wow. It just makes me really nervous, and I know how badly he wanted to win a Derby for Todd, and obviously it's not always about just the connections. The horse did his job as well, but that's a special part of that story that kind of touches my heart the most, that I think of any of the stories we heard this weekend.
A couple of weeks later, of course, it was the Preakness Stakes, and JK and I had sort of a spirited back and forth about the results of that race. Let's check it out.
I'm very happy making the argument that Classic Empire has been best in both Triple Crown races, and this is how racing goes. With a little bit of luck, I feel like that horse could be running for the Triple Crown in 3 weeks' time. Instead, as it stands, he's 0 for 2. Agree or disagree with that statement?
No, I think there's something to that. I mean, definitely. Well,
feel free to argue with me. It's more fun when we disagree.
I don't know. I mean, look, like I said, a horse that runs fourth, it's hard for me to suggest. He ran 7 lengths further by ground loss on a day when the inside mattered. He was the only horse who moved up, who did any running really on the outside on a day when I think it's very clear the inside was best. He got punched in the stomach at the start and had trouble finding a run turning for home. And the winner had as perfect a trip as you'll see pretty much in the Kentucky Derby. I'm confident saying he was best. Yeah, no, I don't disagree that he was best, or he could have been, the argument that can be made that he was best. I think the biggest thing that I'm taking out of the two races is two things. One is looking at Lee has gotten the two best possible trips and setups he possibly can in two Triple Crown races. He got the inside with a fast pace in front of him on Derby Day, and then he got a fast pace in front of him with two contenders ding-donging ahead of him, and he ran on an honorable third. And I wasn't really, or fourth, third or fourth. I always forget what happens behind the exacta because I didn't have the try. So I think a lot of what, yeah. So but I expected him to be like dead last. I thought he was going to be awful off of the trip he got in the Derby. So I would think the Classic Empire is one that you could make the argument. I don't think it's as clear of an argument of like a horse like a little bit different, but a horse like a Fleet Alex who really overcame a lot of stuff and to do what he did. And so, but look, he's a good horse and he ran really well and he did all the dirty work. And unfortunately, I say unfortunately because I didn't bet on Cloud Computing. Unfortunately, Cloud Computing got a perfect trip.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people listening are going to say, wait a second, okay, we understand the Derby point. Maybe you're exaggerating a little bit, but what about the Preakness? Didn't Cloud Computing beat Classic Empire on the square? I've already revealed my answer to the question, but what's yours?
I don't think it was like not on the square. I mean,
I thought Classic Empire was clearly best.
I don't think it was clear. I mean, Cloud Computing sat right in behind that. It's not like he was like 5 lengths back. I mean, he sat right in behind it. Here's the thing, right? Is it would have been here's the thing. If Classic Empire gets Cloud Computing's trip and sits in behind and relaxes, saves ground, then he wins too.
Yeah, well, that's basically what I'm saying. When one horse does the dirty work, you can be close to that pace, but there's a huge difference being close to that pace and being the one doing the actual dirty work. And I didn't look at Trackus, unfortunately, before we came on the air, didn't have time, but when you're talking about a margin that tight, that ground loss is the difference to me alone. The pace is the difference alone. You put them both together, that's why I think he was best. I'm not trying to denigrate Cloud Computing. He ran awesome, but I just think that, Classic Empire, no matter if you're looking at a performance type of a figure instead of a raw speed type of a figure, like I guarantee Craig Milkowski Timeform US figures higher. I shouldn't guarantee, but I would imagine that methodologies that use ground loss in the equation, Classic Empire is going to have the better figure. That's all I'm saying.
Right, I think that. But why didn't they rate Classic Empire? And for me, the reason they didn't is because the horse has always been kind of quirky, and they felt like let's not try to get too cute, and let's just kind of go on with him. And we also don't want the Derby winner to get away from us.
Well, yeah, exactly. And let's talk about that idea. Oh, I don't think it was a mistake at all. I think it was a terrific ride by Julien Leparoux. And I think that the criticism of the ride is a little crazy, to be honest with you. Because imagine what these same people are saying if Julien grabs or even just doesn't get his position going forward and the Derby winner gallops around the track. Now, it's really easy to say when the Derby winner comes up empty, that wouldn't have happened. And it probably wouldn't have as bad as he ran. But then again, you give a horse with that kind of, inherent class, despite how bad it worked out on Saturday, some sort of easy, uncontested lead, you might have seen a very different scenario. And especially in a world where it seems like most of the astute handicappers and horse players are lamenting when jockeys aren't aggressive, and you more than most, JK, have pointed out, you don't want to just see them being aggressive early. You want to see them being aggressive, turning for home and trying to gut the field and get everybody else on the stretch. That's exactly what he did. So I don't understand. I haven't paid a lot of attention, but I've seen a little bit of criticism, and I don't know if it's from any of the same people who are normally being critical of jockeys for being too passive. But to me, it's almost insane. Where do you stand on this?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Here's the thing, and I said it when we were talking. People, because everyone knew that I needed Classic Empire in the tournament to have a significant bankroll and to continue to play. People ask me, like, well, don't you think he moved early? And I said, and then it kind of clicked in my head. You cannot be the guy who constantly complains about the fact that jockeys are always grabbing and no one's aggressive, and they sit out there and they let these horses wire fields and say that what Julien did was not right. Now, here's the thing. If Julien sits a little bit more chilly and waits, do I think he wins the race? Yes. But I will never, ever, ever criticize him for the decision he made. He lost a nose when he did what he thought he needed to do, which was go. And I'm cool with that. I'm fine with it. I'm fine with losing when the right decision theoretically was made.
I bet many of you out there are expecting the next clip to be about the Belmont Stakes, but that show had kind of a weird buzz underneath the whole thing, and I decided just to skip right over it. Our discussion was fine if you're interested to go back and listen, but it was nothing earth-shattering. I much preferred a conversation we had a couple of weeks later where JK asks me a simple question and I go on for about 5 minutes concerning Royal Ascot.
I do want to know how hard it is to get a drink.
It's not bad.
Long lines? Lines?
No, it's not bad because there are so many bars. Well, and also let me emphasize this. I did it a little bit differently. I think the way to do it is if you have the time in your life and you're willing to do it, it's a go early, stay late kind of a situation. So I would get there because I had work to do too. So I was staying with my buddy Simon in South London and would just like get up whatever time I got up, 7:30, whatever it was, and just get out get dressed and get out the door and get there. So I was able to basically get there and have worked for, an hour or 2 or 3, and it was still 11 o'clock some days. So at that hour, you were still able to get a good table out one of the fancy bars. So we found this cool place. It was just Pimm's and champagne, and we were just rocking the pitchers of Pimm's Cup. So typically it would be me, Matthew Taylor from At the Races, Kevin Blake from the Final Furlong podcast, who's fantastic and one of my favorite racing pundits, a guy who I've known on message boards for more than 10 years, but had never had a chance to meet in person. And, various crew of other people, Deirdre from the Final Furlong pod was there as well, and had a chance to just you go up and you take turns buying pictures of Pimm's. And if you're starting there at 11 o'clock, you've still got, gosh, what is it? 3.5 hours until the first race. So there was a lot of socializing at that part of the day. And then a lot of during the day, it's 40 minutes between some of the races, but it happens. I can't quite explain this, but it just happens faster than it does. It feels faster than it does in the U.S. There's a lot of running around, especially if, like me, you're going out to the parade ring, the pre-parade ring, meeting up with various people. The time felt so precious during the day that I didn't do much drinking. It was usually you have a few before and then sort of enjoy the day's racing. And then, though, the few times that I did want to get a drink, no problem at all. I found the one place, Woodford Reserve, had sponsored a julep bar. So, of course, I couldn't resist getting a julep or two. You got to keep the cool Woodford gold julep cup, which was neat. I bit my tongue very hard and resisted to tell them all the ways that I would have done the juleps differently. They were delicious as they were. There were just a few party fouls, at least to those people in Kentucky. The one I'll mention is one of the juleps was garnished with a slice of cucumber, and that's just a no-no. I couldn't bite my tongue on that one. I had to go tell them what was what. But there's places all over the course, so it spreads out the crowd. And then after party is huge. There is sort of famous after parties in the various parking lots where people are very proud of their tailgates. They'll be in their top hat and tails with their trays of cucumber sandwiches and bottles of various libations. I didn't see any Tito's, but you could always change that, JK. And then they do a sing-along after. Did you read the piece I wrote about the sing-along?
I didn't see it.
All right. The problem with DRF Live, it's awesome because it comes up right in the feed right when people are thinking about betting the races. So that's how we did it. But some of the stuff that I wrote, I think deserves a little bit longer shelf life. Maybe I'll go ahead and do a little best of collection and post it on my old blog. And one of the things I think you'd be amused to hear about is that after the races, there's this big organized sing-along out at a bandstand in the back. There's a singer, a conductor, and like a little orchestra in this bandstand, and they sing old-timey, almost like folk tunes, and they sing pop tunes, Daydream Believer and Hey Jude and things like that. And then it sort of culminates with this suite of patriotic songs. One of the funniest things, and I actually found it sort of like strangely moving, was one of the most enthusiastic crowd reactions to the sing-along was on New York, New York, a song that I have no idea how it got a bit of a toehold even in a UK sing-along, let alone to be the song that people got the most into. But people were super into it, and it's just an amazing scene. There were thousands of people at the end of the day crushed around this bandstand. So there's a lot of options to hang out and continue the fun after the races are over. So that was a very long-winded answer to your question. But yes, you can get a drink.
From time to time on the show, we do little competitions amongst ourselves. One this year absolutely backfired, where we did our drafts for the Triple Crown races. We each picked, I think it was 5 horses, and I'll just let the clip speak for itself about who won and what exactly happened.
The party. We did get a question also about the Kinshin Slam. I hope you can hear me rolling my eyes as I say that. JK, I'll let you explain what that is.
Oh, the Kinchin Slam. Well, it's just a little thing that woke up one day and decided I was going to do, and no, I'm kidding. It's the most. I couldn't have gotten any luckier. I mean, I didn't even bet IRAP on Saturday. To be honest, I thought I bet Gervin. So I'm dead serious. I don't know if you saw the race beat. It's like a really, really tough photo. It's the nastiest camera angle in racing. I mean, they're probably like, it feels like the camera's at the 16th pole, like filming the wire. And the whole time I needed Gervin in a bet. I was like, oh, come on, give me Gervin, give me Gervin, give me Gervin. And then I thought to myself, but wait, it's like the best hedge ever. I'll lose this bet, but I get to make up something called the Kinchin crown. And then I felt like one of those situations where you have two horses in the pick four and they're both paying about the same, and they're in a photo, so you don't really care who wins, and that's kind of how it ended. So when they showed IRAP, I was like, yeah, whatever. At least I'll go down into fantasy draft immortality.
I thought we were going with Kinchin Slam, not Kinchin Crown, by the way. That's a little too obnoxious and full of yourself even for you.
Oh, actually, I already hit the Kinchin Crown, so this would be the Kinchin Slam. You're right about that.
Exactly. You had the Kinchin Crown when 3 of the 5 of your fantasy draft horses, different ones, won each leg of the Triple Crown, much to the chagrin of Chris Larmy, Matt Bernier, and myself.
But it just this is like better than like the pick 4 I hit in 2012 of like luck. Like I thought like, okay, well, Always Dreaming can probably win the Derby. I guess Cloud Computing is going to skip the Derby. He could probably win the Preakness. And Tappert seems like the kind of Todd Pletcher horse that can win the Belmont. And I got unbelievably lucky. And if you didn't trade me, it wouldn't have never happened. So thank you.
That's right. That's right. It's really that makes me. I was already feeling terrible about this, JK, and now I feel even worse. We did trade draft order, so I could get. I was torn between 2. I don't even remember why I did it anymore. Maybe I was feeling Irish War Cry that day. But yeah, it worked out pretty nicely for you. Let me tell you this. We'll have revenge in some form of bet. You will end up buying dinner at Saratoga once again, as we made you have to do last year. So this isn't over. We're just gonna take a little break from betting until we come up with something where the rest of us can really get a clear edge and punish you as you deserve to be punished.
We talk a lot about tournaments on the DRF Players Podcast, of course, and sometimes that involves bringing in guests. Sometimes it's guests who've done something super impressive in terms of handicapping achievement. Other times it's like this next clip. Stand back, folks. There's a hurricane coming through. Hurricane Anthony's visit to the DRF Players Podcast. Joining me now for his first appearance on the DRF Players Podcast is my friend Anthony Robb. Anthony, how are you doing today?
Good morning, Peter. I'm good today, actually.
You're known in the contest world by many monikers. On my old blog, I think I christened you Hurricane Anthony for the way that you would blow into Saratoga, leaving all manner of wreckage in your wake. I've heard you referred to as Tony Gold in certain corners, but today it's just Anthony Robb for the podcast. Now, I have had a request, a long-standing request that you're going to help me fulfill today, Tony.
Yes.
A couple of years ago, there was a publicized incident where some tournament player, no one I had ever heard of, had simply played one number in a contest. I think in that case it was all the 4s. Played number 4 in every race and ended up winning a valuable prize. And I was instructed that I should track that person down and interview them. I never did that. But when I saw that you, a respected tournament player who I know knows how to study form and spends a lot of time studying replays, understands the game, has been involved in the ownership side of the game, etc., when I saw your name at the top of a leaderboard this weekend and clicked and saw that you won your way into a major Vegas tournament by playing all the 1s, I knew I just had to have you on the show. What the heck happened?
Well, I got to tell you the backstory. Okay, prior to even playing in tournaments, I often used to, like in Australia, the number 1 horse is always the top weighted horse. So when they do the numbers for the horses, so in a handicap event, the one carrying the most weight is always the one, and often the best horse. Sometimes outweighted, by the handicapper. But if I was playing a pick, or we call it a quaddie, but a pick 4 in Australia, I would often just include the one horse, regardless of price, regardless of anything. I do my kind of handicapping, and then I'd just add the one in every leg. And the amount of times that one of those ones turned up was uncanny. So, flash forward years later, when I started playing tournaments, which you got me, introduced me to, I noticed quite a few times, in the back of my head, I was always like, oh, I wonder how the ones will do today, and one particular day, tournaments are not cheap. I actually nearly played the ones. This is about 2 years ago. And halfway through the tournament, I was kicking myself. 3 of them had come off. One of them was not a cap, but it was a big prize. And literally, I would have been leading the table half. Now, to be honest, I wouldn't have won had I stuck with the ones for the entire tournament. But I think it was like a top 10 finish. It was whatever. So, the other week, as you know, I had a pretty rough day, Belmont Day at the track, and I put a lot of work in those 2 days. Kind of got screwed out of the pick 5 the day before and whatever. And I'd only played a couple of tournaments really in the last 2 months. And I was going to a pool party on Sunday, and I looked at entering this tournament, and I thought, well, I will put in, I just looked at all the ones, and they all looked prices, and I had a really quick look to, see if, I was just reaching ridiculously. I was like, you know what, I'm going to play all the ones today, because none of them were short prices, except one might have been 5 to 1. And I'm like, you know what, if I get lucky today, I've just had so much bad luck lately, and then I did have some sort of intention of maybe having a look halfway through, and if I got really lucky, then actually handicapping the rest of the card.
In a live event, you have that benefit, of course. And in fact, I do advise people, and I'm sure I've given you this advice too, when you sign up for the contest, as soon as you can make picks, there's no reason not to pick all of something, whether it's every favorite, every horse ridden by John Velasquez, every number 1, just so you have something in there should life go awry, should you forget, etc., etc. At least you'd have something. So
absolutely.
That I get.
And you've got a much better chance of doing what you said, or Joel Rosario in every race. He's probably going to win one race, right? So it's better than having absolutely nothing in there. But that was not really the point. I mean, I had made the mistake of rushing it, prior to a pick and pray quite a few times, and actually ended up trying to canceling because it was so that was part of it. But it was I kind of did have a pretty strong intention to just play the ones and see how the chips fell. Look, if all the ones had been 7 to 2 and 5 to 1 or whatever, I probably wouldn't have done it. But they just looked like very open races, and all the ones were morning line 12 to 1, 15 to 1 or whatever. And I ended up, hitting a capper, and then another capper ran second, and that was all it took. I couldn't believe it when I looked at the leaderboard.
I've got to believe you're interrupting part of the story here, because you used a key couple of words before, and those key words were pool party. So I'm assuming that, you're downplaying you almost did this intentionally. I'm going to guess that closer to the truth is you put them in as your default picks, and you must have figured to look around the 3rd or 4th race to see what was happening. I'm just assuming you got swept up in the pool party, and we all know how that can happen. And then you looked. Explain exactly what happened during the day.
Okay, so in the morning, I got up very early on Sunday morning, and I did look. As I said, I looked. I didn't get up thinking I was going to play all the ones, but when I looked at it, and I always look at see, what are the ones prices on the ones, and it's just the stars aligned. They all were big prices, all of them, and I'm like, well, you know what? 1 or 2 of them win, So then I gave it a quick glance at the form, a couple of notes in a few different databases I look at, like a very 5 minutes probably max, and just glanced, just literally glanced over, some public handicappers picks and this and that, and just sort of glanced at a few stats, but very, very briefly, and I was like, you know what? I think I'm going to play all the ones today. I'm not sure. I wasn't sure, so I put them in, and then I had breakfast and dilly-dallied around, and then I was going to go back, and I was like, you know what? Let's do it today. I just because the last few weeks, I haven't had a bet for a couple of weeks actually, which is pretty strange for me, but I just decided to have a little tiny break, and I was like, you know what? Today's the day to play the ones. Now, back to your question about was I tempted to look? I absolutely was. But you know what? I had a funny gut feeling that I shouldn't be looking. I should just totally tune out and look at the end of the day. And I did think about it on 3 or 4 occasions. I went to look in, and when I did look in, there was one race to go when I looked in. That's when I looked. There was one race to go, and seconds. $9 obviously wasn't going to change to one.
It had worked to that point. Now, I did notice there was one race where you played a 5-horse. What happened there?
Well, there was no one in the race.
The one had scratched.
Now,
okay.
But 5, if you did notice, all my alts were 5s.
Right.
So they're the two. 5's the other number because 5's a good gate. And I don't know. That would be the other number if I did it again. That would be the other number.
Well, have you thought about applying this strategy going forward? I mean, are you just gonna? Is it the kind of thing where do you feel like to continue to do this is now your new thing, or do you feel like that's like finding a $20 bill on the street and then returning to that same spot every day, expecting to find another $20 bill?
Yeah, look, let's be honest. I got really lucky. I don't want to, and I also don't want to lose all respect in the handicapping world for doing that. So I'm going to go back to actually, I'm going to take my win and go with it. I'm not saying I'll never do it again, but it's a fairly big investment, these tournaments, so I'm not about burning money on all the ones. But listen, I'm sure there'll be another day I will maybe play all the ones on a second entry, something like that.
Well, congratulations on the big win, however ill-earned it might be. I've also seen you put in the work plenty of days and get nosed out of some big scores.
Absolutely. I almost feel guilty, but I really don't. Because I've had those days where I've put in hours of work. And so I'm going to take it.
All right. Well, you mentioned your Australian racing background before. I just want to ask you, I'll let you get out of here in a minute, but just want to ask you a couple questions about that. That was interesting what you said about, and it made sense, in a handicap race in Australia or the UK or Ireland, top weights, number one. Obviously, that does not apply here, though you do have the fact of a lot of dirt racing and maybe an inherent advantage sometimes on a day where the inside is good with playing the one. It doesn't sound like that factored into it. But I was just curious, more generally speaking, what other aspects of form study or handicapping that you picked up in your native land have helped you in your handicapping contest play and your general play in the USA?
Oh, definitely. I actually look at the weights. I don't think a lot of handicappers in America put too much emphasis on the weights. I mean, I know it's been talked about before, but I really do, have a look if somebody's getting a really big break, even if they've got a bug. I tend to lean towards a horse like that, especially if it's coming up in class. If it's coming up in class and it's getting that big break, that might be all it needs. So that's an angle that I use definitely.
Are you planning on participating? I know you've played in past years in the Saratoga tournaments. Any thought of bringing your, play all the ones to a live bankroll format in Saratoga potentially?
I mean, that'd be pretty ballsy, but yeah. I mean, I'm in the hut. You know what? I just bought into the Huddy contest, so maybe
the infamous Huddy contest. I don't think we've ever talked about that on the podcast. Yes, the sort of underground contest that a lot of industry people are in. So yeah, that's maybe some Sunday comes and you have picks left for the week, and you could go ahead and look for the ones who are 12-1 or higher and throw them in, Huddy. But how about seeing you live up in Saratoga? Is that going to happen this year?
Oh, absolutely. Well, you do know I'm an investor in the Long Road Colt No Worries Mate by Buenaventure Stables. So I'm very excited about Saratoga this year. You'll see me up there quite a bit, as you know. I'll be up there for the big stable event on the 28th, and which is my birthday weekend, actually, and the stable has an event. And then, of course, the Travis weekend, and hopefully a few other times. There is still the big Saratoga tournament this year, is there?
Indeed. Wednesday, Thursday. It's 2 separate tournaments now. It's a live bankroll format, but that's one that a lot of contest players will be coming in from all over. If you see Tony up there, if you can show him proof that you were one of the people he beat in the contest where he played all the ones, I'm pretty sure he'll buy you a pint. Fair?
Fair.
Excellent. All right, Anthony, thank you so much for taking the time out to join us today. Good luck, and hopefully the next time I bring you on the show, it will be for perhaps a slightly prouder win.
No worries. Just remember all the ones.
Cheers, buddy. My favorite feature on the show over the years has been Tales from the Track, where I or one of our guests will just tell a story about something interesting that happened to them at the races. This was a pretty unforgettable one from this summer at Del Mar. Tale from the Track time. I've given you a lot of time to do this one, so tell it as slow as you want. And obviously we can, no pressure to go too long. We can always come back and hit up another question or do some other stuff toward the end of the show, Jonathan. But tell us about your experience on Saturday night.
Well, I won't say where, because I won't say that.
No, don't be too specific.
Yeah,
Don't be too
I won't be too specific. I will say there will be some names in here. So I had an okay day on Saturday at the track. It worked out, even though Arrogant didn't do well. I did well enough, and we were going to. I was at Del Mar, if I needed to be clear about that. We were going to go to dinner. I was with Matt Bernier, Pete Rotundo, the Man in Black, Lute, one of Lute's friends, and so we decided that we were going to go to dinner. But before dinner, we were going to stop by this little charity thing. Rotundo had tickets for it, so it was right kind of close to where we were going to dinner. So we go to this situation. I had on, and the good thing about going from Saratoga to Del Mar is you can remix some of your fresh outfits. And so I was wearing those florally shorts that I wore that everyone made fun of me about, those black ones with like all kinds of different flowers on them. And I got a black T-shirt, whatever. It's Del Mar, so you don't have to get dressed up for Del Mar. So I was, I wasn't like dressed nice. And you go to this place, and there's people with like sport coats on and stuff. It's still Del Mar, but so we go to it's an outdoor thing. So we go to the thing. I got a ticket. I show the ticket. I'll go in, and I go and I get ask drink orders, and I order drinks, and I look up, and Rotundo was missing. So I was like, well, let me, the guy wanted a drink. Let me go get it to him. So I go to kind of look for him. And when I go to look for him, a gentleman stops me and says, "Can I help you?" And I kind of like paused and I looked at him and I'm like, "What do you know where Pete is? Or what do you mean?" I didn't say that, but I said, what do you mean, can you help me?" And I kind of knew where he was going with it, but I wanted him to say it out loud. And so I just kept playing stupid. I was like, "Well, what do you mean, can you help me?" And he says to me, he starts kind of stammering around, "Well, can I help you?" And then finally he goes, "What I'm saying is I don't know you, and this is my party." And I looked around and I was like, "Yeah, you know all these people, trust me." And I didn't say that out loud. I said, "Well, my name's Jonathan Kinchin. I'm with the DRF. I'm here with Pete Rotundo with the Breeders' Cup. He had an extra ticket. We came by here before dinner." And he was like, he kind of backed off. He's like, "Oh, okay." And then I just
Can I spell something out? Can I spell something out and say it so you don't have to?
Yeah, sure.
Plenty of random white dudes walking around not that fashionably dressed at the party. But this guy, no, they didn't get the "Can I help you" treatment. Just throwing that.
And
out.
here's the thing. So we'll pause for a second on that. I've obviously always been, I've always been my entire life a brown skinned person. I grew up in an affluent area, and I went to a high school that was, most of the people that were at that high school did not have the same color skin I did. I've never been a guy that like ever pulls that card. I think it's a, I think that the world around us in this situation are a great illustration that it matters, but I've never wanted to use it as an excuse for mattering. And so I just try to pretend it doesn't exist, because I feel like it's for me personally, I like the challenge of overcoming that situation and that's kind of where the story goes, is me wanting to overcome the situation, not with making a scene or getting bent out of shape, but just spending a little bit of the winnings that I had on the day. So anyways, so we separate, I tell the story, and everyone's like, geez. Oh, and here's the other part of it. And this is probably really down the rabbit hole, but I just need to say it out loud so people understand where I'm coming from.
Yeah.
I understand that I chose to wear some shorts with flowers on them and have a sleeve tattoo and wear a t-shirt. Like, I get that I made that choice, and I get that I have to live with what someone might assume from that maybe I wasn't supposed to be at a, high society charity event at Del Mar when the Sport of Kings is going on. I get that. And so like I said, I take it as a challenge. So I go back to the friends. I tell the story. We're all laughing. I'm not even upset at this point. I just think it's funny. It's kind of annoying, but whatever. So then they start this auction, and the first item is a picture of Mike Smith, signed picture of Mike Smith. And it's not even like a horse involved in it. It's just a picture of Mike Smith, which is kind of funny. So I look to see.
This is an item you'd be bidding on anyway. I'd just like to throw that out there, knowing your love of Mike Smith.
Right. So a friend of mine that I know, who I've been on his radio show out at Del Mar, Felix, I think his last name's
Taverna. We can give Felix Taverna a plug. Felix is radio host out there. I was a regular on his show in my pre-DRF days when it was on the mighty 1090. I'm not sure if he's still there or moved on, but Felix, well-known figure in Southern California racing, knows everybody, his words would be a gold standard for those in the room. Just to set up Felix for a second.
So I see him like on the mic, and so I said, "Okay, friendly face." And I noticed that the gentleman who had asked if he could assist me was holding the picture that was being auctioned. So I looked at Matt and the guys, and I said, "I'll be right back." And they all looked at me like, "What are you doing?" So I go to the front row. He's kind of like stuck at a number. I won't say what the numbers were. He's stuck at a number where no one's like going to go up anymore. He's like, all right, going once. And I didn't double the number, but I went like higher than I needed to go. And you should have seen the look on the guy's face when he turned and saw that it was me. And then Felix says on the mic, just to like validate that I at least had some right to be there, "Oh, Jonathan Kinchin, one of the greatest handicappers in the country, comes in strong." And so needless to say, I won the picture, and the guy had to hand it to me. And after making a unnecessarily large bid for a charity foundation, and so it all worked out pretty well. So whatever. It's just, I think it's just, like I said, I'm not trying to get preachy, and we don't talk about political stuff on here very much, but I just think it's just a good story that illustrates that the world around us isn't perfect, but at the same time, I think that you also have to be, you have to look at things objectively. To a certain extent, I understand his questioning. And there's a lot of choices I've made in my life that I can control that could have led to that. However, I do think that it's a mistake in the world if you're always jumping to conclusions about things without knowing more about it. So, it is what it is, but it worked out well. Hopefully he'll think twice next time before he offers his assistance, and maybe we'll find a better way to go about it. Hey,
racing
how you doing?
People should know better. Racing people should know better. Yeah,
He could have got the same. He could have
introduced
done the same
himself
thing.
to you and seen what you said and been able to have a line off that. I mean, we're around. Jake and I are on the golf cart on the backstretch last week and going around, and he's like, I'm just like, just pointing people out to me, and like you see a guy dressed. I mean, we won't name names again, but somebody dressed just like a total slob, just not in a bad way slob. I was dressed like a slob myself, just hanging out in the backstretch watching horses. He's like, yeah, that guy's worth billions of dollars. It's racing. You shouldn't be judging a book by a cover anyway. So it's a little annoying to me that the fellow felt emboldened to do that to you for whatever reason. He decided it was okay to do so, and I was very happy to hear you shove it in his face like that. Definitely one of my favorite tales from the track ever. And I imagine now at your desk in your war room at home, you will have the framed picture of Mike Smith right next to your win picture from Derby Day of Arklow.
I should sign the picture. Me and you should sign the picture. We could give it away. No, I've got an idea of what I'm going to do with it. But it's and the best part about it, I'll tweet a picture once I get it. The best part about it is like literally, it's not literally. Sorry, I'm not supposed to use that word too much. It's not like a racing picture. He's not like on Zenyatta or on Songbird. It's like a close up of his face, as if you had a crush on Mike Smith. This is a picture that you would want because it has nothing to do. That's nothing to do with him as a rider. It's more like highlighting his dashing good looks.
The handsome man, really the cherubic smile. What's wrong with that? One of the biggest events for me all racing year, Travers Stakes, one of those days where I really still try to stay in touch with the joy of being a racing fan. We got 2 clips related to this year's Travers. One is a story told by our buddy Pipes in his visit to the podcast on that Friday before the Travers. And then the other is a little bit of a recap of our Travers this year, story that involves Pipes as well.
I'm switching it up on Looms Boldly over here, and I'm taking the host role here. I'm going to start asking you guys the questions.
I love it. No, it's always a free-flowing conversation here on the pod. You're more than welcome to throw that stuff out. So the quick story I wanted you to tell was, we've had a new regular at the Paddock Bar this year. My daughter, Perrin, she calls our little area upstairs the clubhouse, loves hanging out with the guys. And like a true horse player, not always the best loser. Chris, I wanted you to tell the story of my conversation with her that I've heard you tell a couple people.
Well, I thought you were going to say there's a new member to the Paddock Bar, and you were going to talk about the guy that you invited up last week, the buddy of yours that screams for every horse in every race. I was going to say to you, geez, I hope that he doesn't come back. I thought that was going to be the story.
Very mean. He's listening right now, and you're bad mouthing the poor guy. No, the other story.
On your daughter's note, she's much like me. She's very sour after when she doesn't get things her own way, and she was a little upset the other day. JK, she didn't win the race, and her dad did. Her dad was jubilant right in her face, and I would have done the same thing that she did. I would have told him to knock it off. And Pete told her. He looked at her. He said, "You know what? You got to be happy for the people that are winning up here, including your father." And she did what I would have did. She just walked away. I love her. If you put her up for adoption, Pete, I'll take her. I'll throw my hat in the ring.
I'll keep that in mind. There'll probably be some European vacation at some point. We'll send her off to God knows where in this crazy horse track world to stay with Uncle Pipes.
But no, she's cool, man.
6, and this was a big group effort. There were a lot of people involved. A lot of my friends who are part-time race trackers or even twice a year race trackers. JK generously letting everybody in on the action. And then through 5 races, sitting 5 of 5 on the pick 6. We'll talk a little bit about ticket construction later. But why don't you talk through how and what you were feeling sitting 5 of 5 heading into the Boston Spa?
It was exciting. I was wearing out. In fact, I keep doing the clearing the throat because we screamed so much on Saturday. I asked our friends Nick Tamero and Travis Stone, who are much better at math than I am. If Eric Bialik was there, I would have asked him. When we're 4-5 and 8-5, what's our mathematical what's the odds, say, our mathematical probability that either Lady Eli or Antono win? And the consensus was anywhere between like 80 and 92%. Then someone said, well, what about takeout? And it got confusing. So I felt good. I felt good about that. The trickiest part about it was Antono was clearly a better scorer, but our good friends, Pipes, who was on the show on Friday, Chris Pipito, and Doogie were alive to Lady Eli only. So, the celebration was better with Lady Eli. Tales from the Track. Chris left. He had some bad beats on the day. He left to go to his Lucky TV in the grandstand to watch the race. And so we hit it, and we're all celebrating, high-fiving, carrying on, boom, 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 boom. Everyone's having a great time. Boozy milkshakes are about to be ordered. And we realized that the Pipes is nowhere to be found. And so they're like, oh, he went to the grandstand to watch the TV. So we're standing up on the balcony waiting for him to turn the corner so we can cheer him home. And he turns the corner, and he looks up. And I'm telling you, he's on the other side of the path. Like, he just came out of, like, where you get your hand stamped. And he looks up, and he sees us directly. We start going nuts. He's going nuts. People around him are looking at him like, what the heck's going on with this guy? He's screaming. And he comes up, and it was a ton of fun. It's always a lot more fun when other people can be involved in those situations. It's fun to win by yourself, but it's absolutely amazing to win with other people.
I learned something about myself, and I think the lesson is I'm not quite as sick as I thought. Jonathan brilliantly constructed these tickets. We don't need to get into the specifics of the numbers, but each pick six combination was had multiple times. So everybody really had a good amount at stake. And it was twice as much to Antono as it was to Lady Eli. And I found myself sitting down to watch that race, and not like I would have been upset had Antono won, but rooting hard in my heart for Lady Eli. The idea that it's so rare, you hang out with these people every day, you share your bad beat stories, the ups and the downs, all the vicissitudes of gambling, and there have been plenty of them for our group this summer. And to just have that rare opportunity. I mean, I can't even remember the last time when it felt like, we had 30 people in our spot or whatever, and it felt like everybody was going to win if Lady Eli won. And it probably didn't hurt that the filly in question was Lady Eli, one of the great racing stories of the last several years. And I was very pleased. I was very pleased with my route in the stretch for Lady Eli. You remember what I said, JK?
Oh, no, I don't remember.
I was just hollering, "Go on, champion! Go on, champion!" And
I do remember now. It's a little bit of a fog, if you know what I mean, but I do remember that.
Have her get us to the line, and to have everybody be able to win together was special.
I from a race perspective, I watched the replay again the other day. I mean, Irad rode her so confidently. Yep. He was just, with the stick down, right-handed shoulder tapping her. And that was it. He never even felt like he needed to reach back. And I've been around a couple of jockeys lately, and they say spank them. And I've heard it coast to coast, and it's a cultural thing too. I've heard the Hispanic Spanish jockeys say spank, and I heard Kent DeSormo say spank. So it's like that's what I'm gonna start saying now. I'm gonna start saying spank. But he didn't even have to reach back. I just thought it was a ultimate display of class. And how good is she? And
it's been such a pleasure over the years to get to follow and talk about Lady Eli's career on the DRF Players Podcast. And so great to have her part of that special day. And glad that folks got to hear a little bit of the Sultan of Schenectady, Chris Pipito, Pipes himself, on the show, the Piper at the Gates of Dawn. Let's move on to our next clip. This one also has to do a little bit with Saratoga and the results of this year's paddock bar elections.
Narrow vote. There was a runoff in the end, I'm happy to announce that I was in fact elected mayor of the Paddock Bar once again for the 2018 season, but they also decided, JK, to make you king. So I guess I'm reporting to you now, technically, in my role of mayor.
You can just call me my grace. That's what they say on not Lord of the Rings, but Game of Thrones.
Game of Thrones. Yeah. So come to the Paddock Bar next year. You can watch me bend the knee for Jonathan Kitchen. I know you haven't gotten to that season yet, JK. You'll get that joke in about 6 weeks. But that's
okay. Yeah, I need that. And if there's anybody at the Paddock Bar that looks like Khaleesi, make sure you send her my way as well.
We have a few things on this show: the Mike Maker fan club, also apparently the Amelia Clark fan club. Let's segue to talk about something that happened regarding the stewards at Del Mar. I don't know if you saw this story or not, JK, so I'm just going to read it to you, and you're going to give me your reaction. This one, and this comes courtesy of our friend Frank Scattoni, by the way, another one of the stars of Win Place Show, whose next episode will be airing, if you're listening live, in 25 minutes on TVG. Norberto Arroyo meeting. Jockey Norberto Arroyo Jr. appeared in the steward's office with an incorrect apostrophe, regarding a disturbance in the jockey's, incorrect apostrophe, room earlier in the week. He was accompanied by his fiancée, Elizabeth Del Rio, CHRB investigator Jim Hamilton, and jockey Rafael Bejarano were also present. Jockey Arroyo stated that he got upset, but not physical, with another jockey because a family member of that jockey had been performing ceremonies involving voodoo dolls with the purpose of performing curses on himself and other jockeys. Jockey Arroyo was told not to disrupt activities in the jockey's room, incorrect apostrophe, and continue to bring issues that are of concern to the stewards. I have no words, JK.
Oh, I did have breakfast the other day with Eric Gio.
Oh, right. He's famously used to have the voodoo dolls, right?
Yeah. No, I'm joking, but he does. He jokes about it, being from Louisiana. Yeah,
I think he used to actually have them in the barns in Saratoga.
Yeah, no, he did. I think I've seen the picture actually. Yeah, that's really kind of weird.
Who do you think it was, first of all?
Well, I started to try to think Cajun first. Right, it sounds like a very Cajun thing to do.
Fair.
So I thought Kent DeSormo, but then I thought he doesn't. He seems like a little. I've never heard anything like that. So I don't know. I don't know who else.
He's got a lot of baggage, but I don't think there's voodoo dolls in the bags.
Yeah, I mean, who else is Cajun there? I don't even. Who knows? Maybe it's some crazy, somebody from some crazy Latin American country that gets down with the voodoo dolls as well. I just think it's funny. Some of the things that, when you see it in print, it's a little bit funnier. It probably wasn't nearly as funny during the moment when they're in their heated exchange, but
I mean, it's weird. I'd love to talk to a pro athlete about this. I mean, it might be different in football or hockey, some sport where your lives aren't, well, in the moment anyway, literally at risk on the field. But it does seem maybe a little bit in bad taste to be hexing people in a sport where, you're basically, a minute from the worst case scenario at any possibility. So, and this, represents growth for Arroyo, who earlier in his career famously once punched out a Pinkerton at Saratoga. We used to call him the pugilist. He was very quick to his fists. So it seems like he's experienced some personal growth to only have words and end up in the steward's office. Anyway, let's hope they get it all straightened out so they don't have to change the name of Southern California's next track to Santeria Anita. Peter Thomas Fornatel back with you on this supersized Best of 2017 edition of the DRF Players Podcast, joined by producer Craig. Craig, you had many contributions to the show this year, but perhaps none more significant than your role in making the Outplay JK show a reality. I know you weren't there live for it, but you teed up the whole thing, got the tech sorted out. Was that as fun for you to listen back to as it was for us to do?
Yeah, no, I absolutely loved Outplay JK. I think it was everything that kind of we hope to make and put out, fan interaction live, all kinds of video elements, live or not really at the track, but while live racing is going on, and really fun personalities with you and JK. I got to watch about the first half hour or so live before I think it was Col Nidre when we were doing that, so I had to dip out a little early. But I absolutely loved Outplay JK. It's something I hope we can start to do again, kind of as bigger racing enters the schedule once again as Derby prep season comes around. So yeah, I loved Outplay JK. It was a pleasure to make and pull off, and I'm hoping to do another one real soon.
I hope so. Maybe as part of the final push for our own World Championship of Handicapping, we could get another live contest on a Friday afternoon with some sort of bonus. And maybe this time JK won't get so lucky and do so well, and a few more people can get a free roll out of the deal. We considered putting in a clip from that. It's worth listening back to. For the record, it was right around the hour and a half mark. It's kind of fun to go back and listen to the end, but we're not going to slug that in the show. We're going to let you find that on your own. Speaking of shows that people requested that you might want to check out on your own, if you can go back in the feed and look, we've talked about Mike Hogan before. The last show that he was on, we had some requests for, and there's some good stuff. There's some good stuff there, and the first show without him, where I pay tribute to his time as, like you, Craig, one of the MVPs of the podcast. What do we have next? Where are we going from here?
Well, Pete, it was a really exciting 2017 Breeders' Cup, and we're going to head to next, yours and Jonathan Kinchin's review of a day at Del Mar filled with a bunch of long shot victories, and of course, Gun Runner's incredible win in the Breeders' Cup Classic.
The Breeders' Cup Classic. Turns out it was Ali Holmes all along.
Yeah, wow. Gunrunner showed up, and what a cool horse. It's another reminder, once again, of what happens when we allow our stars to stay in racing. Ran third in the Kentucky Derby, finished his 3-year-old year well enough, but his opportunity to come back and race is what's seen him reach the pinnacle of the sport, and he's the number one horse in the world.
Absolutely. Earned that moniker with a tough performance. That brought up that thought, the one negative thought I'd had about Gunrunner potentially earlier. I still ended up warming to him and having him be the top pick in the race, but that idea that he might be a flat track bully who excels when the competition is easy but doesn't necessarily have the toughness to fight it out and win on the biggest stage. He certainly put the lie to that with that effort in the stretch the other day. Couple of questions, obviously, before we continue to dive into this race. Generally speaking, I don't think this is the right race to have this conversation on, but it pertains to all the races. So let's start here. Was the way the racetrack was playing helping dictate the outcome of races on Friday and Saturday, Jonathan?
I mean, I think that it was to a certain extent.
I definitely think it was, to tip my hand.
Yeah, I don't think that, look, I was kind of against Dre Fong. Anyways, I think a lot of people look to that race as being part of the evidence packet that people are putting together that the inside wasn't good. So that race isn't the one that screams out to me. Arrogate's performance to me had nothing to do with the racetrack, the inside of the racetrack not being good. He just wasn't very good. So there's a lot of situations like that I think can be misleading. However, I do believe that the racetrack did affect some of the outcomes of the races, and one of the things we talked about when we were walking down the stairs to go to the infield, Pete, and I don't know if you were planning on transitioning to that, but it's like, I think in this sport, as handicappers and as bettors and as trainers and as owners, we get upset when the bias is favoring horses on the inside, because it feels like it doesn't give the other horses an opportunity when they're actually running fast, and you never heard anyone complain about the rail being dead. Really, it's always like, golden rail, speed, you can't pass. You always hear that, but you don't hear a lot of people with that same moaning and groaning about you can't wire a field. You can't wire a field. And so unfortunately, I think that track supers and racetrack superintendents and racetrack executives and people that have power to influence the racetrack, I think they always tend to not allow speed to be overly overly rewarded by the way the racetrack is playing, and so sometimes it can end up in days like this.
That makes sense. And I was a little surprised that it didn't appear that the track, to me, did not change between Friday and Saturday. And I think it's for that exact reason. We saw at the Breeders' Cup at Santa Anita a few years ago, Friday the paved highway, Friday the paved highway, and Saturday it appeared to be back to normal. Again, that came down to a matter of watering, almost unbelievably. Watering at a slightly different time, but it didn't seem like that happened. This was absolutely the wrong race to talk about that about, because we did have one of our very few wire-to-wire winners in Gunrunner. Just great personal story to share with the audience about this race, and I think it will tie into the Arrogate conversation, which is why I'll bring it out now. We have a good friend of the show, the Sultan of Schenectady, the Piper at the Gates of Dawn, Chris Pipito. He was in a unique position to, I'm not going to get into the whole deal, but he was able to have one of the biggest bets of his life in a very responsible, smart way. And it was all relying on Gunrunner's nose. And I had the pleasure of watching with him, and the TVs outside the Veranda Cafe, just randomly, like something in a movie. It ended up at the start of the race. It was 4 guys from the Paddock Bar hanging out at Del Mar, having this massive route on Gunrunner. And Chris reminded me of this later. 4 steps out of the gate, I said, well, Arrogate's not going to win. And I think he thought that was a little extreme, especially at the time. Was I wrong? Was there something just off about the way that he looked in those first 100 yards, JK? I mean, just not the same horse, right?
No, not the same horse. And it's really sad to say and sad to see. His last 3 races, I wish I could erase them from my mind and just remember his 3 races prior to that. 4 races prior to that, excuse me. Those are the ones that I think kind of stand out. It happens. But I think in situations like this, it makes us appreciate the great moments even more. It's just because it's nothing is guaranteed, and there's no foregone conclusions in this sport. And that's what makes it so special. That's why when he won at Dubai after missing the break, it was so electrifying, and why it grabbed all of us by the heart and grabbed us by the throat and made us feel a certain type of way. And now his showing his mortality, I think, kind of makes you appreciate those moments even more.
I think that's a fair way of looking at it. And to me, one might say, Pete, did you not see the Dubai race? Why would you say that he couldn't overcome a little bit of a, duck in at the start or whatever it was? To me, it was just such a form clue that this horse, who, if he was different than we'd seen the last few times, I'm not saying he had to go to the lead, but I feel like that horse if that horse had still existed in that way, I feel like he's at least getting a position going forward. I feel like him having another slow away was just clearly a case of a horse mentally showing he just wasn't what he was. And I think you kind of already answered this, Jonathan, but I'll ask it even more directly. Do Arrogate's last 3 races, how much, if at all, do they diminish his greatness in our minds? I mean, this was the horse that our colleague Mike Watchmaker and others were mentioning in the same breath, and we did too, to Secretariat after the run in Dubai. When you look back, do you think we were wrong? Do you think he was that good and it just, that was the peak, and it's, the old Jonathan Shepard line about the horses and the stick of butter. You cut the slices of butter away, and eventually there's just no more butter.
Yeah, no, I think that it's as much as I want to try to, be sweet and kind and say that it doesn't influence his legacy. It's just not true. It does. I mean, those are the last 3 races that we remember. He wasn't beat. It's not that he was he ran his race and he was beat by a better horse. He didn't run his race in those last 3 races. And so that kind of hurts a little bit. I will try my hardest to remember the great moments. He still will go down in my mind as one of the greatest horses I've ever seen run. But his last 3 races kind of, to me, make him fall short of being the greatest horse of my lifetime.
Craig Milkowski made a number of memorable appearances on the show. One of our favorite topics in handicapping to discuss with him and the other various experts who we bring on is pace dynamics in races and how pace affects the outcome of races. And this was a great little tidbit from Craig's visit in November that I'd never thought of. And this was made all the sweeter by the fact that this was a show Craig didn't know he was the guest. This is the one where JK no-showed at the last minute. And I brought in this pinch hitter, and he hit one out of the park with this little nugget. Long time now on why you believe that race in, race out, that pace adjustment is more important enough to incorporate into your final figure than the ground loss figure that some use.
I wouldn't say that I think it's more important. I just think it's more possible to do for a small team for a small team like ourselves. Until they start putting reliable ground loss into the data fields that we get every day, there's just no way for us to go watch every single replay from every track and build that into our figures. Hopefully someday we have that. I'd love to do it, but as far as pace works, that's all easy. It's able to be calculated. I can write programs to figure out how fast they were going at different tracks and different distances. Since it's easy to, I won't say easy to do, but, over the years, come up with some good ways and we test it and what works best as far as adding it in. And, it's just easily testable. I guess that's the best answer I can give you.
It seemed like there was a subtle dig at our friends at Trackus in there, Craig, which are purporting to measure the ground loss around the turns. Have you played around with the idea of making figures based on Trackus data, or are you finding the source data not at a level of consistency where you feel comfortable even playing around with that idea?
I wouldn't be all that confident, to be honest. I think the ground loss is mostly pretty good. You can even say the same about times. Most of the time it's pretty good. But, the problem when you're doing figures is that one time it's not. If you base the figures on bad data, it's just going to keep carrying over and over, showing up again and again. And, those mistakes can be pretty big. I've definitely played around with doing ground loss manually, and I like what it does with speed figures. I'm a big ground loss guy when I bet horses, especially during the fast part of the race. If the pace is slow, I'm looking for horses that get caught wide on that second turn. If the pace is fast, I love horses that were caught wide on the first turn. So I'm definitely a ground loss guy, even though it's not built into our figures.
I love that idea. I'd like you to expand upon it for a minute, if you don't mind. Why that relationship between pace and ground loss? Why does that exist?
I just, I did a lot of running in my earlier days. I don't do it so much anymore because I'm kind of beat up. But, I like to use the analogy, if me and a guy of equal ability go out to your local high school track and we decide we're going to race a quarter mile, one time around the track, and I start in the outside lane and he starts in the inside lane, if we look at each other and we go, we're kind of old, we don't want to run this far, and we decide we're just going to walk half of it, I can keep up on that outside turn around that first turn pretty easily. I'll expend a little bit more effort, but is it really going to matter? Probably not. But then on that second turn, when we kind of give each other the eye and start running, trying to show who's best, if I got to stay on the outside, I've got no chance. Because, when the real running's done, I'm covering a lot more ground, whereas that first turn, it really doesn't matter. Now, of course, that's a bit extreme. Horses are never going so slow where you can consider it a walk. But I do think it matters where the ground loss occurs. I don't think all ground loss is equal.
I don't know, Craig. Having watched plenty of New York turf races, it does seem like they're walking sometimes. It seems like an absolutely perfect analogy. How does it change when they're going hammer and tongs right from the gate?
Well, when they're going really fast from the gate, then being wide on that first turn is just usually a death sentence. I mean, you just have to be much better than all the other horses. Really, that's the only way you're going to win with that kind of trip. If you're wide around that first turn with a fast pace, you just have to be much the best to win. And that kind of jumping a little ahead, but like Bolt D'Oro, he was a horse who, whether it was the post or the ride or whatever, I mean, to finish third was an incredible effort in the Breeders' Cup with the trip he had.
Peter Thomas Fornatal back with you in the DRF Players Podcast, Best of 2017. We are getting near the end, Producer Craig, but before I let you go, I wanted you to be able to talk about some of the other stuff you have going on in the podcast world for folks who are interested in hearing more of what you have to say.
Yeah, so if you're a football fan or general kind of sports fan, if you could go over to the podcast store, you should already be there if you're listening to us right now. But you're going to search for Code Green. It's a 1-hour football show that myself and a friend and I produce and run every week. We have a lot of fun guests on the show. Guys like former Jets quarterback Jay Fiedler was on recently. Jeremy Curley. We've spoken with Kevin Garnett if you guys are basketball fans. And it's a real good time if you want to check out the show. Again, it's called Code Green on the podcast market. Or if you want to follow along on Twitter, it's going to be at Code Green SBR. Or if you want to hear some stories from the Daily Racing Forum control room or kitchen, as I like to tweet, it's going to be at cgorbs94.
All right, good stuff. Let's clarify something about your show. I heard it originally described as a Jets and Eagles podcast, but it sounds like it's evolved to be a bit more than that.
Yes, yeah. When we first started out, we had that kind of Jets-Eagles focus. Being from New Jersey, the kind of big fan bases, New York and Philadelphia, and we were kind of mixing them together for a podcast. But as we grew, we ended up kind of taking a more national stance. And if you guys are interested in listening to it live, it is on SB Nation Radio every Saturday night at 8 p.m. SBNationRadio.com, or if you have an affiliate in your market. So, yeah, just football, sports, and overall good time.
All right, I love it. And football's a good segue to the story that we're going to close out the Best of 2017 with. Mike Maloney, frequent guest on the show this year, had the pleasure of collaborating with him on his new book, Betting with an Edge, that you can get in the DRF store, or hit me up on Twitter at LoomsBoldly if you're interested in a signed copy. Here's Mike telling a story that did not make the book.
Before we go, though, Mike, you've had many entertaining close encounters with various celebrities within and without the horse racing industry. Tell us about that one encounter you had a few years ago up in the suites at Del Mar. I like this one.
Gotcha. I spend every summer spend a little while in Del Mar, and the people take very good care of me. The bettors concierge there is Betsy Christmas, very nice lady, and she'll hook me up with a hotel reservation, and she always gives me great accommodations at Del Mar in a room on the 5th floor called the VIP Lounge. And I've sat in there for years. She always gives me the same table, and it's great. So I fly into San Diego to begin my trip, and I've communicated with Betsy. She knows I'm coming. She says, everything's good. You have your same table every day you're here. So I have trouble at the rental car place in San Diego. I'm running late. I'm frustrated. I'm hungry. I haven't anything to eat. So I was planning on going to the hotel, checking in, having some lunch there, and then walking over to the track. Now I'm running a little late, and I'm upset, frustrated. So I just drive directly to the track. As I get there, the gates are just opening. So I say, okay, good. I'll just take my form and stuff, and I'll go upstairs, and I'll get in the VIP lounge, and I can take a breath. And they usually have like a can of mixed nuts up there. I'll eat a few of those nuts until the concession's open, and then I'll get something to eat. And, I can do some handicap, and I can finish some things up while I'm here. Well, when I walk into the VIP lounge, I'm the only one there, which is not unusual. Mostly people show up late right before the races. I'm the only one there. And instead of just a can of mixed nuts and a couple of bottles of water, one whole wall at the end of the room is a beautiful buffet. And it has tenderloin and, the big metal containers with the lid still on them with tenderloin and grilled chicken breast and all kinds of vegetables and a couple of beautiful salads and desserts. And I'm like, oh, man, this is perfect. They've really upgraded this room. This is fantastic. Wow, Betsy, this is, I got to tell Betsy how cool this is. So I load up 2 gigantic plates. Well, just as I'm starting to dig in and take like the second bite, this guy walks into the room, and he gives me like a nasty look. So he walks to the other side of the room, and then another guy comes in behind him, and this dude must be like 260 pounds and about 6'4", And then a guy comes in behind him, and he's even bigger than that guy. So like four of them, file in behind the first guy. So, and they're all kind of like looking at me with attitude. And I'm like, I belong here. I don't know what your guys' problem is. I figured they were supposed to be in a dining room. Their dining room's adjacent to this lounge, and they just got lost and ended up in the same room. So in a couple of minutes, less than that really, the smaller guy that came in first says, "Excuse me, but I don't think you're supposed to be in here." And I said, "Well, I'm pretty sure I'm supposed to be in here." He says, "No, I don't think you are." And I said, "Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure I am." And he said, "Well, I think I should call Betsy Christmas and check." And I said, "I'll tell you what, I'll save you the trouble. I'll call Betsy Christmas." So I dial Betsy's number and step out in the hallway. And I'm sure Betsy's going to tell me how, hey, I'll have security come up. These guys are in the wrong room, whatever, because they're too big for me to ask them to leave. So as soon as Betsy picks up the phone, I tell her, "Hey, Betsy, there's a problem in the VIP lounge. There's some guys that think I'm not supposed to be here." And she goes, "Oh, my God, Drew Brees. We gave the room to Drew Brees and his teammates. And I forgot to tell you. I told everyone else, and I forgot to tell you." So she says, "Come to my office. I'll give you some seats. We'll put you up to someplace else." And I apologize, Mike. I'm so sorry. I said, "Betsy, don't worry about it." So I hang up and I walk back in, and I have to apologize to this guy. Now I look at him, and hell, he's Drew Brees. Obviously, I don't know why I didn't recognize him the first time. So I kind of mumble, "I'm sorry, Mr. Brees, can I leave a tip for the waitress, and on my way out, I apologize. You guys have a great day." And he's like, no money. And, "My linemen were impressed with your 2 plates of food over there. Go ahead and finish those before you leave." So that was my Drew Brees encounter. Is I busted up his buffet,
I hope you gave him a couple of winners.
He was actually very nice about it.
I hope you gave him a couple of winners at least for all that trouble you caused.
He didn't ask. He was just ready for me to. It was that situation. You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
The great Mike Maloney on the DRF Players Podcast. Always a pleasure to have Mike on, and I'm sure we'll be hearing more from him in 2018. All right, Craig, we're getting very near the end here. I think it's just time for thank yous, and I'll start by thanking you for the fine work you do producing the show all year long, and especially coming in and participating in the Best of show.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, working on the DRF Players Podcast and getting the chance to come on the mic. I always like to hear my own voice because that's the kind of person I am. But no, this has been great, and here's to many more great shows in 2018.
I love it. Some more thank yous. I want to thank Craig Milkowski, Chris Pipito, Anthony Robb, Mike Hogan, Paul Matisse, Mike Maloney, of course. Am I forgetting anybody?
No, I don't think so. Maybe Jonathan Kinchin.
Oh, yeah, that guy. Thanks very much to Jonathan Kinchin. He was not here for the last hour, but he's always here in spirit on the show, and want to thank him for his time and efforts in 2017. He gave out a few winners on this show, too. Most of all, I want to thank everybody for listening, tuning into this special edition, hopefully sticking with us in 2018. I'm Peter Thomas Fornatal. May you win all your photos.